Good evening. Welcome back to this session. Thank you very much for staying all this time on this long and academic day. Tonight we have two distinguished guests, in two, again, lectures, where I have on my left here Mr. Karim Mroue, and he's too well known to be introduced, but I'm going to introduce him very briefly though. Mr. Karim Mroue is a left-wing thinker, was Deputy Secretary General of the Lebanese Communist Party from 1984 to 1992. Throughout this professional life, he wrote for the Arabic press and has many contributions in the field of political thought and theory, dealing with issues of culture in the Arab world, questions of socialism, and the major Arab causes. He has written more than 20 published books, foremost among which the Karim Mroue remembers in like a biography in 2002, the leading historian figures, Palestine and the cause of liberty, and creative works by Palestinian authors, Confessions, The End of the Century, and the most recent book actually was published 2 weeks ago, as he told me, is actually chapters from my experience in thinking and politics. The other guest we have is Mr. Andrey Kortunov, Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council, was previously the Deputy Director of the Institute for U.S. and Canadian Studies and the founder and first president of the Moscow Public Science Foundation. He graduated from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. He had a PhD degree in history from the USSR Academy of Science, and he's the author of over 120 publications dedicated to the analysis of Soviet-Russian-American relations, global security, and the foreign and domestic policy of the USSR and Russia. I welcome both guests once again and give the floor now to Mr. Karim Mroue. You have 25 minutes, so the floor is yours. I don't really know if we have any patience left there to listen to us, these speakers, these two speakers, after such a long day of discussion revolving around extremely important issues for us all. Nevertheless, even now that you are here to listen to us, in spite of this suffering all day, I will start my lecture. When I was written the text of my lecture, which I sent to the center a week ago, under the entitled Critique of the Arab-Russian Relations in the Czarist, Russian Czarist Empire, and in the Soviet era, not the time, and modern times as well. When I used the word critique of relations, it was only to talk about the progress for someone like in development, actually, for someone like me, about 70 years of age, in my experience in communism, with the name that it has socialism, which the name was called communism. So I really embarked on communism in the spring 40, in the 48, the time of the Nakba. And actually, on account of the Nakba in particular, I was an Arab romantic nationalist. If I consider that the kind of thinking that I was affiliated with, the political direction was a romantic one I belonged to, namely the Arab pan-nationalism. It was not really at the level that would meet the aspirations of a young man like me at that age, 18 years old. So I considered that failure would require me to, as a dreamer until this very moment, to think of a better future and to insisting on my dream of a better future. I considered then that I had to choose a different path, a different thinking, a different project. So I belonged to communism as an idea, romantic one for that matter, before reading about it. And then I waited for 4 years to belong, actually, until I belonged to joined the Communist Party. I was in Iraq between 1947 and 1949. I returned to Lebanon. At the end of 1952, I joined the Lebanese Communist Party. For that period of waiting, it had some significance for me. I sought to see whether I was right to belong to this new thinking or not, this ideology, especially that I had been influenced by the role conducted by the Soviet Union in the Second World War, the victory, and the crucial role it played in actually winning over fascism. I admired the Soviet Union, and I did not know, and it was Stalin as well. At the time, little did I know that he had committed many, many crimes. I came across, during this path, I encountered the division, the rule decision. I'm not going to get into details about this. I was really upset. I was upset by the Lebanese Communist Party, which I thought I was going to join. And I was also irritated by the Soviet position, but I had still some lingering hope that that was a major power that faced ferocious enemy, the fascism, and was triumphant over it in the best interest of humanity. So I decided to join it all the same, and I did that. Over a very long period of time, my relation with the Soviet Union, which continued since 1953 until 1989, including certain stages, and we had, or I had, as a communist, through my presence in the Lebanese Communist Party and also through my visits in the missions I was entrusted with representing the party, and also in the name of some Arab communist parties which used to meet at the time, and also in 2 international organizations in which I was representing the Arabs, the International Organization for Youth, Arab Youth, with international tasks, which led me to visit the Soviet Union and to stay there for several times, and to visit also the socialist countries and to live there for some time, which made me see very closely and to know closely the overall picture of what one would need, someone like me would need, who belonged to that project, which included a lot of pains and suffering. But nevertheless, I was a disciplinarian. I was really disciplined as a struggler, a fighter would be in the Leninist party, old party, to be disciplined and to accept what would not be perhaps accepted by any reasonable person. Therefore, during in the mid-60s, I was with some colleagues of mine where we decided to leave this kind of blind obedience to the Soviet Union, and then we were punished. There was a strict punishment was meted out to us, where the ambassador of the Soviet Union in Lebanon, and he was impudent really and very rude, but we continued with our struggle for 1 year, or we call it in my latest book, the renewal revolution in the party and being liberated from the blind obedience to the Soviet Union. George Howie was punishment. George Howie was one of the prominent figures, one of the members of the group, me and others, was punished by the Soviet intelligence and by the Soviet leaders, and Soslov and Panolov, that they would describe him as a spy for the American intelligence. Obviously, that was a lie and a fabrication. We actually not changed, held fast to our position. We had a conference, 1968, and that's the conference where we identified the kind of relationship between us and the Soviet Union. Unlike what was prevalent at the time from all the communist parties. Now, from that moment on, I personally started, together with some of my colleagues, not with everybody, to read events, we as communists and part of the communist nations, to read developments in a critical fashion. And I was adamant to give this title. Now, hence the title of this research, which is, I apologize for this preamble, which has been rather long. Now, I go back to my characterization of the crisis, the first era, the first stage, but very cursorily I would point out, as I could refer to some references that the Orthodox, Russian Orthodox pilgrims used to start coming to Jerusalem since the 10th century. I read that day that the relations go back to the 8th century. I don't have knowledge about that, but this is an additional piece of information for me. But what I managed to find through my research, that the pilgrims started coming to Jerusalem from Russia in the 10th century, and then the Orientalists, the Russian Orientalists, started coming to the region, the Arab region overall, the Islamic as well, but the Arab region in particular. But what is the most important thing here is that the Tsar decided, the Russian Tsar decided, for circumstances I'm not going to get into, 1882 decided to establish what was like an university, but intermediate stage of education, perhaps secondary stage of education in Palestine. They started in some villages and then established in Nazarite what was Nazareth, what was called the a university or something to that effect. they started to establish schools, and the departure point was in Nazareth, from there reaching Lebanon and Syria. And there was a number of schools, totaled 114 schools, and the Lebanon share from them was 14 schools. And when the project expanded, an Orthodox Lebanese from Quzma household was invited to be the supervisor of this group of schools. And under his auspices, under his supervision, a school was established to prepare teachers. And after that school started preparing teachers, a number of them were selected to go to Moscow and to work for their PhD and other studies. And it was the desire, it was the objective of those schools to, according to what I've read, my research, I don't have to necessarily adopt as the position, but according to my readings of it, and this is an observation I would like to add, every country, every major country in particular, regardless of its size, had interests. And those interests are related to how it would defend its position in so far, depending on size in its international relations or in certain parts of the world. The interest. The Russian interest of the Imperial Russia was to be strong, the Tsarist Russia to be strong in face of Catholic Western countries in particular, and also the Ottoman Empire. And it's well known, 18th and 19th century, and even the 20th century, Russia engaged in a number of wars. And one of the most interesting thing I would like to point out, and unfortunately now I've authored a book of the memoirs of a consul in Lebanon in the mid-19th century, when the Mutasarrifiyya school was established, the state, Mutasarrifiyya, small state of Lebanon and Lebanese mountains, following the revolution and sedition, the sectarian strife that followed the revolution. And Russia was a partner with Britain and Austria in imposing this Mutasarrifiyya state on the Ottoman Empire. The important thing here is that Russia was a partner. Nevertheless, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, about the time of the Tsarist, the Russian Tsarist Empire, to move on to the stage which constitutes the beginnings, heralded the beginning of the Soviet Union. But I'm talking about, when I talk about beginnings, I say about what before October Revolution, before the birth of the Soviet Union. And in particular, I'm referring to 1905 revolution, and I don't know whether you know anything about it or not. And some of you would know what is the 1905 revolution. The 1905 revolution came after the conference, the third conference of the Socialist Democratic, Russian Socialist Democratic Party, which was divided, in which the party was divided between the Bolshevists and the other group. The Bolshevists was established 1903 in the third conference of the Democratic Socialist Party. The Bolshevists started working under the leadership of Lenin, who actually, from that date onwards, worked to reach power. All his writings indicated that power was his main objective. And although he was Of course, he was an important reader of Marxist and Engels' writings. He considered that Russia, and a backward capitalist country, could become the first country in the world in which the socialist revolution could triumph. He said that as the main objective for himself. In 1905, there was an uprising. The uprising was in a number of locations, in a number of cities, Petersburg, and particularly in the ports of Odessa, ports and harbor on the Black Sea, in the garrison Potemkin, called Potemkin, the garrison. And the Bolshevists was not really the ones who launched such a revolution, but they were hastened to actually join it as soon as it was launched. What's more important in this respect is that those who took part in this revolution, and especially the heroes, the soldiers of Potemkin garrison, they went then to Egypt, to Alexandria, and where there were a large number of Italians, Greeks. This is well known, historically well-known fact, and where they joined and gathered and impacted, had an influence on a number of Egyptians as well. And one of them, actually, his name escapes me, although he's well known. He was highly intellectual, Bolshevist as well. He worked for some time within Egypt and then went to London and then came back. And after the triumph of the revolution, became a secretary, Lenin's secretary. This is according to the information that we have. And these are not my information. I derived them from a book, Rifat Said, about the history of the socialist movements in Egypt. Why did I refer to this? The Bolshevist revolution, before it became successful, its impact reached the Arab world, and I defined Egypt to start with. I have no information. I don't really know whether Omar al-Mukhtar's revolution, 1911 in Libya, and Abdul Karim Khattab's revolution, 1915 in Morocco, whether those revolutions under the impact or were influenced by this movement in 1905 in Russia or not. I do not have any answer to this question, and perhaps if any member in the audience or anybody knows to answer this question, I'd be grateful to hear the answer. But what's more important perhaps is that when the October Revolution succeeded, and then Lenin took a decision in the aftermath to actually expose Sykes-Picot agreement, and Sykes-Picot, yeah, and the edition where they actually exposed the Sykes-Picot agreement, according to which the Arab countries were established, the modern Arab states were established. He didn't take Lenin's position not to object, and I underline this one, not to object to the establishment of Arab countries, but to object rather to that the imperialist countries establishing and carving up those countries and dividing putting them under their control. It was a position against the British and French colonialist powers which imposed their mandate on those Arab countries. This position was accompanied by a declaration by Lenin for freedom of self-determination, right to self-determination for the peoples that were under the imperialist control. According to the information I had, after the October Revolution and the Lenin's repetitive announcement and the people's rights to self-determination, in the light of all of this, it is said, the information indicates that there were a number of revolutions broke out. Chinese one, another one in Iran, and the Egyptian revolution as well. And I can't remember the other revolutions. And the Egyptian revolution, and I also pause on the revolution. I have nothing to do with the Iranian and Chinese revolutions. As for the 1919 revolution, 1919, the Wafd party was established under the leadership of Saad Zaghloul to have discussions about the British about the Egypt's independence. At the same time, Saad Zaghloul was with the member of the Wafd party, who was in exile to start with, and then joined in the negotiations. There was a genuine mass revolution in all the Egyptian cities, and it was established under the influence Soviet Union, something similar, the Soviet state, Zifta state. And this is an important event, and I want to highlight that because 1995 to 1919, the impact of the Bolshevik movement had a great impact on the situation in Egypt. That was very clear. I cannot be certain whether the 1920 revolution was impacted or influenced by the Bolshevik revolution or not. I cannot be certain about that, but it seems I've taken too much time. What can we do? Well, it's a major topic. Can't be helped. I apologize. Okay, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I just want to say that in the Soviet era, the relation between the Soviet Union and the Arab world changed several times. At Lenin's time and Stalin's time, Lenin considered the nationalism is supporting the Soviet Union as well. Victory of the socialist revolutions in the Arab world is not only to support the Soviet Union, but also to support the revolutionary movements. Stalin started to another position, saying that this nationalism was rendered in the service of the Soviet Union as a state, in the name of romanticism, of socialism, and the rest of it. I do not want to elaborate any further on this. To the time of Khrushchev, there were three theories came into existence, three theoretical topics which are extremely important. The first of which was the non-capital progress. The feudal system can go to socialism without passing through a capitalist system. The second theory is closely related to the first, that this process takes place through a number of revolutionary Democrats. That, according to what we've seen, they all turned out to be dictators and despotic dictators, but those are revolutionary leaders who are moving with the state, moving from the feudal system in the third world countries to the socialist system without going through a capitalist system. And the argument for that, the excuse for all of that, is that the proletariat in those countries cannot be the leader, cannot lead the change. The third topic, which is more serious, Ulyanovsky, the role of the armies in the third world. So three theoretical, complementary issues, how it all ended up in Khrushchev's time in particular, and then the time Brezhnev, and then eventually with reading to Gorbachev, the relation of the Soviet Union from the communist parties and the national liberation parties changed to a support of regimes which are led by those who took power through military coups. Abdel Nasser in Egypt, Hawari Boumediene, Hafez al-Assad, Jafar Numeri, and ending with Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi. So nobody was excluded at all from those who were excellent examples of leaders of Arab countries, and using the iron fist and the nuclear and bombs as well, atomic bombs. So we should not forget that the Soviet Union offered help, provided important, extremely important support for the Arab countries in all areas, economic, educational. Tens of thousands were graduated from over there, and also in military support, and then supported all Arab countries in all battles. I remember one time I was Polonov, I was a member of Politburo, and I was one of the comrades talking about the Palestinian cause. And then he said, what is the role of the Soviet Union then? And he was angry. What do you mean? Oh, we're supposed to take your place to liberate Palestine for you? Did you go try to liberate Palestine and we prevented you? All your wars. And we supported, we gave you weapons, everything you needed. And what's important here, that the Soviet Union, in spite of all this position, that negative position I referred to, gave tremendous help to the Arab countries. And the last part from Brezhnev, there was stagnation. At the time of Gorbachev, the Soviet Union was actually dying. It was moribund. The crisis reached its top end, and the Soviet Union came to an end, in spite of what I have indicated, namely the support, different types of support in various areas. And I move on from the Soviet Union to the modern age. And the modern age is two, actually, parts. Yeltsin's time, after the fall, direct fall of the Soviet Union, and Putin's time. Yeltsin's time, where the Soviet Union, Russia entered into mafia's era, the mafias which destroyed the Russian economy. And then Putin came along to pragmatically reach power, and he started practicing a completely different policy from Yeltsin's. What I want to say here is that, to get to the conclusion, because I've taken too much time, what I want to say is that it's always the case that the major countries have interests. However, in order to preserve the interests, they should have the ability as well. And my estimation of the concept of the major power today, the concept is different from what it used to be in the past. In the past, it was military power, with some economics. But today, the major power is basically economic and political in nature, and then comes the military side. Because, in my opinion, there is no possibility now for wars to break out. The major wars we witnessed in the past came to an end. That's my opinion. I might well be wrong. But I can think that the essential aspect of the major power is its economy, its economics, and its politics. It's unfortunately, and I'm saying it bitterly, in fact, that me as an Arab citizen, I have an interest in that there should be distinctive relations, as distinctive as possible, with Russia. Why? Because our country's interests is that to have good relations with a country like Russia, which has a long history in its relations with the Arab countries. Unfortunate thing here is that the Russian state today is trying to play the role of the major power, and it's lacking. First of all, the economy, unfortunately. I might be wrong. I'm not an expert, economic expert. The Russian economic. It's not excellent. It's actually based on oil and gas and some raw material. So if it's a weak economy and its policy is confused, as we have seen, how could you play a role of a major power? If they consider the Soviet Union, Russia considered the Soviet Union today, that the importance of Tartus naval base is important, this is a grave mistake. So far as Russian relations are good with Arab countries, all the seas in the Arab world become like centers, the bases for fleets, Russian fleets. I'm saying that from the departure point of my critique of the Russian policy today in Syria. I have not, until this very moment, and I've met with my friend Bogdanov several times, and I wasn't able to understand that when he says Daesh and all these groups, I say, yes, you're right, I agree with you. But the Daesh, ISIL, how did it become? ISIL's owning now, controlling half Syria. The barrel bombs, the weapons used by the regime, this regime that's killing its people, destroying its country. Syria has been destroyed. How can Russia give weapons to that who is destroying his country? I haven't understood this. I can't understand it. Until now, I haven't seen a satisfactory answer. I saw Bogdanov. The work in Syria as you did what happened in Lebanon during the civil war with the Taif agreement. Taif agreement brought an end to the civil war, and we elected a new president. Where's the disaster? Your interests for Tartus space? Anyway, my opinion, we today in a stage where we Arabs should bring pressure to bear on Russia to practice a role that's more constructive in order to for Russia to have standing when the crisis in Syria comes to an end, when Iran agrees with the States, with Iran, which is an agreement with the States, it will not look at Russia. It will not turn to Russia. So my information is that the Iranian people, all of it, have misgivings about the West and America. And if the crisis in Syria is resolved and Russia is in a position that's hostile to the Syrian people, antagonistic to the Syrian people, what is the importance of the Tartus naval base? I conclude then with a hope and request that I'm going to use a word, and the reconciliation, that the reform, the Syrian Russian policy improves in the Arab world. I'm sorry to have taken so much time.
I'd like to thank Mr. Karim Mroue, who summarized in 35 minutes the experience of 60 years of political activism, and presented a critique about the critique of Russia's relations with the Arab world since the Czarist Empire. Now, Mr. Andrey Kortunov will present a paper entitled, "Is there a role for Russia and the Arab world?" 25 minutes, sir, please.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Мне, конечно, очень трудно говорить после Карима Мроue. Я не обладаю таким опытом.
So it's hard for me to talk after the word of Mr. Karim Mroue. My experience is, of course, less than the one of Mr. Karim Mroue. I will try to be brief, especially that I represent the barrier between you and the dinner. So, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for allowing me to talk And I think it is a very important conference. And we can see that this conference is taking place in Qatar, which is very important. In Russia, there's a viewpoint that says that Qatar is the first opponent or first country opposing Russia's policy vis-à-vis the Arab world. It is very important in order for us to talk honestly in a transparent way to discuss the common grounds between us, but also the disputes. Talking about Russia's role in the Arab world, in order for a certain country to play a certain role, there should be two main conditions. The first is that Russia should have serious interests and mechanisms. And mechanisms in order to implement and play this role. The second is that the countries of the world should accept Russia as a constructive and legitimate actor on the Arab scene. Before the end of the Cold War, there were no doubts about these two conditions. The Soviet Union, as a major superpower, had its interests throughout the world, including the Arab world. In addition to that, the main countries in the Arab world used to accept, sometimes based on several conditions, used to accept the Soviet Union, considering that the Soviet Union is the opposing country to the West. Now these conditions are not fulfilled, or there are doubts surrounding these conditions. In Moscow, some people are saying that the Arab world is a dangerous region, a complicated region, and Russia has got no vital interests compared to the Far East region, for example. And Russia has no mechanisms, has no tools allowing this country to influence the Arab world. Furthermore, sometimes when we talk with our Arab counterparts, we hear that Russia has been losing the Arab world, and the Russian successes are based on Washington's mistakes, or they are based, these successions, on the long-lost history. And sometimes we hear that Russia is not a means for the solution of the problems. It is part of the problem. Therefore, I think that the position of the people who doubt Russia's role is important, so we cannot put it aside or marginalize these people. Therefore, I would like to say that I do not support these viewpoints. A lot of people today talked about us as neighbors. Russia and the Arab world are neighbors. We have a lot in common, which is common history, which is common long-standing cooperation, and we also have mixed families. There are a lot of people from Russia in the Arab world taking part in the conflict also, on the other hand. And we can also say that the number of Arab citizens who migrated to Russia and live there permanently is increasing. These developments can result in disputes or, let's say, competition, and they also can lead to closer ties and cooperation. With the fluctuation in the energy prices, we can find new areas of cooperation. Russia and the Arab world have interests to build a multipolar world. A question might arise: what could Russia possibly offer to the Arab world, and how about the role of Russia in the Arab world? I agree with what's been said regarding the weak economic base of modern Russia. However, Russia is still a permanent member of the Security Council, UN Security Council, and based on this membership, Russia can influence various cases in our modern world. Is it a positive or a negative influence? This can be debated. And sometimes there are problems, just like what happened in 2003. After the UN resolution was issued regarding Iraq, of course, had Russia voted against, the things would have been different. Russia is also involved in several crises in the world, including the Middle East. Russia is a member of the G4, and the negotiations with Iran, the dialogues regarding Syria, and other issues. So if we'd like to talk about the Arab world, I can predict that the United States will probably reduce its presence in the Arab world. Is that something positive or negative? We have yet to see. There is the Iraqi dossier, the Syrian dossier, that need to be taken into consideration, and this is why the ruling elite in the U.S. doubt some measures taken by the U.S. The U.S. is also trying to become independent at the level of energy. Self-sufficiency is very important for the U.S., and the United States will be less dependent on the Middle East when it comes to the energy supply. Maybe as a result, the situation in the region would change, and we should take this into account. When it comes to Russia, of course, there are some problems in Russia that need to be solved in order for Russia to play a more active role in the Middle East. I would like to distribute these tasks to three types of tasks. First of all, the short term, the medium term, and the long term tasks. For the short term, we can talk about finding a solution to the Syrian crisis. I think that without a fair solution in Syria, Russia's relation with the Arab world cannot improve. I think we can easily say that the Syrian conflict has influenced the relationship between Russia and the Arab world, maybe similarly to the effect of Ukraine's conflict on Russia's relation with the West. The Syrian crisis is not only a disaster upon the Syrian people, it is shameful for humanity in the 21st century to keep witnessing this conflict, daily conflict, resulting in the loss of a lot of lives, and the world is currently witnessing stagnation, or the world is getting used to what's happening in Syria, and we cannot be tolerant of that, especially when it comes to superpowers in our world. Throughout my previous or throughout the previous years, I have taken part in dialogues with representatives of the Syrian opposition in Moscow and dialogues with my colleagues in the United States. I have participated in the Chemical Committee and regarding the chemical arsenal of Syrian regime. I think that the only solution to this conflict in Syria is should be based on the Geneva talks. These talks, of course, have been hampered. This is something else. But I think that the solution should be built upon this dialogue, maybe with an extensive representation of different parties. This might lead us to the better relationship between Russia and the United States, and it is like a hope looming in order to find a solution to the Syrian crisis. I think it is key, in light of these discussions in Geneva, not to have meetings at the ministerial level. I think there should be continuous, regular action and plans to cooperate in order to find a solution to the Syrian crisis. The experience of the destruction of the chemical arsenal of the Syrian regime shows that when there's a will, there is a way, and this experience might help us reach the settlement. I think that independent research research centers might contribute to developing a roadmap for the solution in Syria. There are several research studies that were founded in the United States of America by members of the Syrian opposition. However, in order to have a more active role for these centers, they should play a bigger role. And when it comes to the medium-term issue, Russia should avoid interfering in the sectarian war in the region. There are divergent views in the Arab world. Some people are saying that Russia is supporting the Shias against the Sunnis. This is incorrect and historically incorrect. The Soviet Union has always dealt with Sunni states. And it is incorrect to say that Russia is favoring one side. Mainly, for example, the refugees, the Muslim refugees in Russia are Sunnis. There are, of course, sectarian problems in the Arab world. For example, we might hear about Sunnis and Shias, but we might not have a lot of information about the Alawites and other denominations. In order for Russia to stay away of these conflicts, Russia should help the dialogue with Iran. It should not be limited to one topic. The long-term strategy. Under this theme, I'd like to mention the Arab Spring, and the examples that we have seen in Russia of people talking about a Western conspiracy and a similar phenomenon like the Orange Revolution. I would like to tackle this issue from a broader standpoint. In my opinion, Russia takes several opinion or stands as a pragmatic country that cares about the current status in the world. Any changes might be perceived as challenges and not new opportunities. So we consider these changes challenges, and we should focus on this side of the story. The Russian policies should target the future. The future is coming, whether we want it or not. The areas of cooperation, the level of research and study center, we can analyze the potential ways to modernize. In Russia, there are a lot of Islamic areas, Muslim areas, and the question of modernizing these areas in Russia is very important, and it might be key to the future of Russia. The Shenzhen issue in China is important to the Arab world, and there is a mutual horizon exchange of opinions, some unification of the perception of the future of the Muslim civilization. I will not be lengthy. I would like to tackle some key points. I think it is time for us to go back to the idea of a region that is free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East in order not to single out Iran at this level. Israel, for example, might change its position at this level. In Israel, there are different visions about the risks compared to the perception of the risks 20 years ago. Maybe we should re-examine the structure of the four countries in the Middle East. We might choose a different path. What's happening today, for example, by replacing the four countries with the one country mediation, I think these things will lead us to another crisis, and it's not the way to be taken. We can talk, for example, based on the ways to transport the goods from the north to the south. We can talk about cooperation at the level of food security in the Middle East. Sometimes we are lack of ideas, lack of political will. I have a short time.
Just for a second. The world is changing, whether we like it or not, whether we are hopeful or fearful. Changes gain speed. And all of us, including the Arab world and Russia, have only three strategy options to choose from. First, we can resist change. And if we do so, the odds are that we will be marginalized at best and overrun by changes at worst. Second, we can accept changes. In this case, we are likely to find ourselves living in the world designed and constructed by somebody else, to their liking rather than to ours. Third, we can try to effect changes so that the new world order will not be imposed on us, but will reflect our values, our aspirations, and our hopes. The choice will depend not only on politicians. It will depend on experts, academics, journalists, educators, opinion makers. It will depend on people like those present in this hall today. I think it is a responsibility that we, as intellectuals, cannot avoid. This is our responsibility as much as of state leaders. And I wish all of us well. Thank you.
أشكر السيد أندري كورتينوف.
I would like to thank Mr. Andrey Kortunov for this lecture, similarly to Mr. Karim Mroue. At the end of this academic day, thank you for your patience. Of course, we can all sleep early tonight after this long day, and we'll meet you tomorrow, 9 a.m. New day. Thank you.